Listen to the word of God as we read from Luke 15. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. Then Jesus said there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country where he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would have gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have enough bread and to spare? But here I am, dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against you and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he sent off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran to him and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost, and now he has been found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked, 'What's going on?' The slave replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you. I have never disobeyed your command, yet you've never even given me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you kill the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you were always with me. All that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and now has been found.'"
Rembrandt's painting, The Return of the Prodigal, is a profound look at the story of the prodigal son that we just heard from the Gospel of Luke. The community gathers round to see what's going on. The older son hides back in the shadows. The younger son kneels at his father's feet, dressed in rags, missing a sandal. And the father, an almost blind old man, embraces the son who once wished him dead. The Dutch priest Henri Nouwen wrote a book called The Return of the Prodigal, and it's a reflection on this painting by Rembrandt. And in it, he talks about one of Rembrandt's self-portraits when he was in his 30s, and it's called The Prodigal Son in the Tavern. It is he himself as the lost son in a brothel. Biographers describe Rembrandt as a proud young man, strongly convinced of his own genius and eager to explore everything the world has to offer. An extrovert who loves luxury and is quite insensitive towards those around him. He was a man hungry for fame and adulation and fond of extravagant costumes and outrageous hats. He was very popular, very successful, and did quite well for himself. However, that did not last long. Before he was 40 years old, he lost his first wife and 3 of his 4 children to death, leaving him with a 9-month-old son. In the next 10 years, his popularity plummeted, and he had to sell all of his own paintings, all of the other paintings that he'd collected, all of his art and his house and his property, just to avoid bankruptcy. The prodigal son found himself adrift and alone, without support and without money. This parable of the prodigal son is probably one of the best known of all of Jesus' parables. And I think it's because it hits so close to home for us. Maybe you identify as the older brother. That's been a trend in churches for the last, 10, 15 years. Let's look at the position of this older brother who is he's the good kid. He played by the rules. But he's now bent out of shape because this younger brother of his who just so insulted his parents and went off and lost everything, comes back and seems to be getting the hero's welcome. But, what about him? He spent all of his life working hard for his parents and has hardly even gotten a thank you. Maybe you feel like that older son. Some of us identify with the younger son. You're the black sheep of the family. You are the one who didn't fit. You're the one who chafed at expectations that your family had for you. You're the one who left home to make it on your own, and you did it your way, and nobody was going to stop you. Some of you might identify with the father. Maybe there's a child whose return you pray for. Well, today I do want to go back and look at that younger son, because no matter who you identify with most closely in the parable, there is something of that younger son in each one of us. Let's remind ourselves of what happened. This younger son went to his dad and said, "I wish you were dead. Give me my inheritance now, and I'm out of here." Asking for your inheritance before your father was dead was a way of saying you wish they were dead. There is anger in this encounter between father and son. This was already a broken relationship. What's amazing is that the father, without a word, it seems, without an argument, gives him his share of the inheritance and lets him go. So the younger son takes the money and runs. He doesn't care about anything or anyone but himself, his own pleasures. But before he knows it, he's broke, and he's reduced to one of the most menial and offensive jobs a Jew could ever have: feeding the pigs. Now, the rest of the story is very succinct. Jesus says, when he came to himself, he thought about home. He knew he'd forfeited his rights as a son, but maybe his dad would at least take him in as a hired hand. And so he started that long trek home, thinking every step about what he would say to his dad, thinking every step about how he might be received, how he might make his case. I can only imagine that with every step it got harder and harder to take the next one and the next one, because who among us hasn't found it impossible to take that long journey across a hallway, to go to someone we've hurt and confess what we have done and ask for forgiveness? The reality is most of us never take that journey. It's almost like there's a piece inside of us that won't let us admit to ourselves, much less anyone else, this terrible thing we have done. And what will they think of us? Will they receive us? Will they shut the door in our face? Will they lash out in anger at us? We don't do well when people get angry at us. Have I damaged irrevocably this relationship? Our Lent theme is good enough, embracing the imperfections of life and faith. Marcia McPhee, who developed this Lent series, said she got a lot of pushback from some pastors worried that the phrase good enough would let people off the hook in striving for excellence. But her response, I thought, was very, very wise. She said that the larger problem lies in the fear that the mistakes we inevitably make will be fatal in some way. The fears that we have that the mistakes that we will make or have made will be fatal. The prodigal son made a choice to demand his inheritance. He made a choice to liquidate that and leave home. He made a choice to waste it all in brothels, loose living. He made a choice to turn his back on his family and his community. And now he was paying for those choices. And the biggest cost was still to be determined. Would the door open for him when he came home? Or were his choices and his actions too much to forgive? How could his father ever forgive him for wishing him dead? What's the worst thing you've ever done? Or the thing you feel most guilty about? Do you ever wonder if it was the fatal mistake? Something that would cause you to lose something of value like a relationship or a community? I was watching this week a little bit of the confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and I have to say I admire her so much. She has worked hard to get where she is, and as Cory Booker said, you got here how every black woman in America who's gotten anywhere has done. Like Ginger Rogers said, I did everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in heels. For a lot of us women in roles that traditionally belong to men, we didn't dare show weakness. We didn't dare appear not to be in control. We had to be twice as good as a man to get half the amount of respect. We didn't dare make mistakes, and if we did, we didn't dare admit them, because if we did, that was a sign of weakness. Men didn't admit their mistakes. We were dismissed, and we were diminished, and we lost respect. So no way in the world would we be finding ourselves walking across that hall to confess a failure or a mistake to someone, because the minute we did, they would look at us and say, you are not worthy of being here. You see, the fear of the prodigal thinking about going home isn't just about the fear of rejection because of what you've done. The same fear is in those who know that just to appear less than perfect means we're rejected and we're tossed out with the trash, because good enough is not always good enough. And it's a pretty lonely existence. So whether you live with the fear that your mistakes will be fatal, or you live with the fear that simply to appear human as opposed to perfect will be fatal, we know something of what that prodigal son must have felt. So how did that prodigal find the courage to put one foot in front of the other and head home? Take a look again at Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal. And look at that younger son. He's dressed in rags. His long, beautiful hair has been shaved off. Has a tattered sandal on one foot. The other is missing. But do you know what he does have? On his hip is a sword, a symbol of his nobility. Henri Nouwen said that he had clung to the truth that he was still the son of his father. Jesus said, when he came to himself, he remembered who he was. He remembered who his father was. Nouwen defines faith as the radical trust that home has always been there and always will be there. And the true voice of love is that of a nearly blind father who has cried much and died many deaths. The story of the prodigal is the story of the God who longs for our return, the God who knows our faults, who knows our sins, who knows our fears, who knows our needs, and covers them all with divine love. This is not a God who demands perfection. This is not a God who demands apologies and confessing and groveling. If you remember the story, the prodigal comes back and he actually starts to apologize to his father, but I don't think his father ever heard it. He was so excited. His son had come home, that while the son is trying to grovel at his feet, his dad's sending the servants back to bring back the best coats and to put a ring on his finger and to get the feast and the party ready. This is a God who says, you're always good enough, no matter what anyone else tells you and no matter what you tell yourself, because you are my beloved child. We can fall from justice. We can fall from faith. We can fall from righteousness, but we cannot fall from grace. Hang on to that. Now, do you remember why Jesus told this story? He told this story because the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious leaders, were grumbling and saying that Jesus welcomes sinners and eats with them. Jesus told them this story to say, this is what the realm of God is like. This is what compassion looks like. This is what community looks like. Either everyone is welcome or there is no community. The divine community that exemplifies God's kingdom on earth depends on the inclusion of everyone, including sinners. Jesus' goal is to bring everyone in, including the religious leaders. Because you see, their failure to recognize grace and celebrate it and join in the party does not define them any more than our failures define us. There's a place at the table for all of us. It was the lost whom Jesus had come to find, and to remind them that the voice of love from the one who cried much was enough to cover them all. So whether you're feeling lonely or guilty or just not good enough, whether you're looking for love and life and fulfillment in all the wrong places and from things that in the end can only take it from you, whether you are resentful of those who seem to get things handed to them, like, that older son who was lost in his own way, whether you think you deserve more because you worked harder, know that you belong to the prodigal God, whose grace you can never fall away from, and know that there will always be a seat at the table for you, no matter what you've done, no matter how lost you've been. For when you remember who you are, when you come back to yourself and come home, there is so much joy in heaven that heaven itself cannot contain it.